Thank you so much to Senator Lindsey Graham. I hope you enjoyed your time on the couch.
It was the best hour, and I will come back if you'll have me.
Wow.
All right.
That's great.
Fantastic.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And is it less stressful than running for president?
Oh, yeah. You're surrounded by a lot nicer people. Who
That's
ask
good to
harder
know.
questions, by the way.
And the couch is surprisingly less crowded than the
It
Republican
is.
field
It's
was
very,
in
very nice. There were 16 of us before.
The debate was a little
remember.
more civil as well. There weren't any nicknames today.
All right, well, thank you so much, Senator. And we are back on the couch at noon Eastern tomorrow. Right now, here's Melissa Francis in for Harris.
Fox News alert. We are awaiting remarks from President Trump at the White House as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to make a statement of his own about the Iran nuclear deal. His office claims they will reveal, quote, significant developments. This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Melissa Francis, in today for Harris Faulkner. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to make a primetime address about the Iran nuclear deal. Local media is speculating right now that he will reveal evidence that Iran is violating the international agreement. All this comes as the May 12th deadline looms for President Trump to decide whether to pull out of the deal. Connor Powell is live in Jerusalem with the details. Connor.
Yeah, Melissa, there is a massive international effort right now to try to sway President Trump before that May 12th decision that has to be made about whether or not to stay in the Iran nuclear deal. We saw Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, talking with President Trump last week. Now, tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to weigh in. He is, of course, a staunch opponent to this agreement that was signed under President Obama a couple years ago. He has been saying that it would be a mistake to sign the agreement, and he has said since the agreement was signed that it was a mistake to sign the agreement. He is, along with many Israelis, very concerned about Iran's not only nuclear ambitions for the region, but also its ambitions in terms of political ambitions for the region and their involvement in Syria and Yemen and other places. What we're being told right now from Israeli officials is that there will be a significant statement made tonight by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about Iran's nuclear activities. Now, we don't know what they were, but we are told from sources here in Israel that Mossad, essentially Israel's CIA, uncovered this information here recently. They are in the process of briefing the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries in Europe as well in the last few hours. This is what we're being told from Israeli officials, new information that's just been uncovered. But again, we don't know exactly what the information is. We're waiting to hear in the next few minutes from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
So,
Melissa?
yeah, I mean, just to review, up until now, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, they say that Iran has not violated the deal. There's been 2 instances where they have had too much heavy water on hand, which is, you know, in theory, there to cool down a nuclear reactor such that would be used for weapons. At that point, they shipped that heavy water out to Oman, I believe it was, in both cases. So it would have to be something more than those 2 incidents if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's kind of the big question here. I mean, the Israeli military, American military, European military officials have all said, essentially, and even President Trump has said this, is that Iran is complying with the deal. There's obviously been inspections. But the question now is, are they continuing to comply with the deal? Have they hidden something? The Israelis are alluding to the fact that essentially they believe Iran has been hiding something, part of this nuclear program. That's not what we've heard from the Pentagon. It's not what we've heard from European officials. But that is what we expect to hear tonight from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That would be significant because for the last sort of 2 years or so, all of the people who have complained about the deal, whether it's been President Trump or others, they've said essentially Iran's living up at least to the spirit or to the details of the deal, but maybe not necessarily the spirit.
No, and one of the sticking points is the idea that, you know, in there's this suggestions and strong wording about the ballistic missile program, but that is not specifically part of the nuclear deal, and that's been a sticking point to a lot of people. And you know, it's been charged that the money that they were able to use from sanction relief, they just poured right into that ballistic missile program, and that's a huge component of this. No?
Yeah, and that's certainly the charge. You know, you hear different things depending on where you sit, not only in the United States, but also in the region. The Israelis will make that charge that this deal is flawed because it doesn't tackle the ballistic missile program. There are other people who say that this is slowing down any effort by the Iranians to build a nuclear weapon. And one thing we've heard, and this is where you get a difference in Israel from the political leadership here, like Benjamin Netanyahu and some of the military, they say this deal is flawed, but no deal is worse because there'd be no eyes in Iran for inspections and things like that. So it all depends on sort of where you sit in terms of political leadership or military leadership. There is a fear that just blowing this deal up and walking away from it, well, then nobody has any idea what's going on in Iran, Melissa.
Well, we'll see. All right, Connor Powell, thank you so much. So as we are waiting for Benjamin Netanyahu, joining me for more now on all of this is Fox News chief political anchor and anchor of Special Report, Bret Baier. Bret, set the stage for us, because Benjamin Netanyahu has been under his own scrutiny lately for his own challenges, and that is all against the backdrop of everything that's going on in Syria, as they feel like their enemies are setting up territory to attack them within Syria, and that has made Israelis very nervous.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's a three-dimensional chess here with the situation, Syria, Iran, Israel, and the U.S. We should point out that the new U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you look live there at the military facility, Israeli, where they will make that statement. He met on Sunday with Bibi Netanyahu, and they talked about Iran. This comes just 12 days before the deadline where President Trump has to make a decision whether he's going to go forward with the Iran nuclear deal or not. And I think that this will factor in to some of what we're hearing inside the White House and some of what the president has said publicly in the past two meetings with European leaders, French President Macron and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who were trying to get some sense of what was going to happen with President Trump. This may be adding to that mosaic of some of the decision-making that's going to come in the next few days.
And as Israel, you know, perhaps if they come out and say they have new evidence, have you heard about this before this morning? I mean, this seems, it's obviously breaking news, but I don't know if there was any chatter about this earlier, or does it come to you as a surprise that they're having this announcement this morning?
Well, it is a surprise, the specific announcement itself. I had heard chatter from different intel officials that the Israelis were anxious to do something, whether an action or some announcement about what has been discovered. They have been active, as has been noted, in Syria, and some of that back and forth you've seen play out publicly. You saw the Iranians tweet out and call Bibi Netanyahu the boy who cried wolf, pointing back to his UN statement with the bomb, at what percentage it was going to be enriched uranium from his United Nations General Assembly speech. So the Iranians are pushing back against getting out of this deal and threatening that if they do, the U.S. does, that it'll scrap the whole thing.
Yeah, does it seem like the tide is turning at all from your perspective, in that, you know, the president wanted to get rid of the deal? There wasn't a ton of support for that necessarily in the international community. Macron raised this idea of, well, we put a new different deal in place. Maybe we're talking about a better deal that incorporates this and some other things. Now it seems like you're even hearing some of that chatter from at least one Democrat. I mean, does it seem like the tide is shifting a little bit in terms of not renewing this, but coming up with something else?
I think that is what is coming out of what we've heard from European leaders. The fact that French President Macron said as much when he was here in the U.S., that possibly it could be restructured, retooled, as you see them getting ready for Prime Minister Netanyahu addressing the reporters. I think that you didn't hear as much of that from Angela Merkel, but at least some indication that Europe really wants to do anything to bend over backwards to try to keep the U.S. engaged in this deal, as we watch live the Prime Minister of Israel.
We're going to listen in here. We don't know if he's going to begin in Hebrew or English. If it is in Hebrew, then we will chat a little bit amongst ourselves until we get the English version. Okay. So it does seem like they are starting in Hebrew and we're having audio problems, so we may let them get onto the right page here before we go back in. Is Brett still with us?
I am.
Okay. So, Brett, obviously they're having some challenges there, and they're trying to get it back together. You know, what kind of evidence would he need to present here, do you think, in order to turn the tide more? I mean, when you talk about Angela Merkel, part of the problem is that the rest of Europe has needed this economic market. I mean, they've benefited tremendously financially from the opening up of Iran, and that's hard to turn off.
Sure. I mean, Europe is clearly engaged in trying to make something work here, not only for what they believe is the security aspect of looking at Iran's facilities, but also for the economic aspect, as you mentioned, for Europe overall. Now you see the Prime Minister, after working out the mic issues, on the move with a handheld mic, but as you said, starting in Hebrew.
Okay,
I think,
let's listen for 1 second and see if he's speaking English or Hebrew.
מדובר בהישג מודיעיני מן הגדולים שידעה מדינת ישראל.
Okay, so I think we're going to monitor that, and when he switches to English, we're going to go back to him. You know, Brett, it strikes me there were two things that we were promised in the beginning with the Iran nuclear deal. They were snapback sanctions and anytime, anywhere inspections. That hasn't proven to be the case.
Right, so far, and there's a lot of critics of the Iran nuclear deal. There's a lot of questions about, you know, is Iran meeting up with all the stipulations? But I will say there are some experts here in the U.S. There are even, you know, in the Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, some experts at the Defense Department.
We have it in English now. Let's listen in. Sorry for that, Brett. Let's listen.
You can listen to Iran's Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei.
I stress that the Islamic Republic has never been after nuclear weapons.
You can listen to Iran's President, Hassan Rouhani.
Nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction have no place in Iran's security and defense doctrine and contradict our fundamental religious and ethical convictions.
This is repeated by Iran's Foreign Minister, Javad Zarif.
We didn't have any program to develop nuclear weapons. Anyway, we consider nuclear weapons both irrational as well as immoral.
Well, tonight I'm here to tell you one thing. Iran lied. Big time. After signing the nuclear deal in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret nuclear files. In 2017, Iran moved its nuclear weapons files to a highly secret location in Tehran. This is the Shorabad district in southern Tehran. This is where they kept the atomic archives, right here. Few Iranians knew where it was, very few, and also a few Israelis. Now, from the outside, this was an innocent-looking compound. It looks like a dilapidated warehouse. But from the inside, it contained Iran's secret atomic archives locked in massive files. Actually, they're a little bigger than this, okay? A few weeks ago, in a great intelligence achievement, Israel obtained half a ton of the material inside these vaults. And here's what we got. 55,000 pages. Another 55,000 files on 183 CDs. Everything you're about to see is an exact copy of the original Iranian material. You may want to know where are the originals? Well, I can say they're now in a very safe place. Here's what the files included. Incriminating documents, incriminating charts, incriminating presentations, incriminating blueprints, incriminating photos, incriminating videos, and more. We've shared this material with the United States, and the United States can vouch for its authenticity. We will also share it with other countries, and we'll share it with the International Atomic Energy Agency. So let me tell you the history of this material. We've known for years that Iran had a secret nuclear weapons program called Project Ahmad. We can now prove that Project Ahmad was a comprehensive program to design, build, and test nuclear weapons. We can also prove that Iran is secretly storing Project Ahmad material to use at a time of its choice to develop nuclear weapons. Here's what Project Ahmad's explicit goal was: creating nuclear weapons. This is an original Iranian presentation from these files. And here's the mission statement: design, produce, and test 5 warheads, each with 10 kiloton TNT yield, for integration on a missile. You don't have to read Farsi to see 10 kilotons here, TNT. This is the specific goal of Project Ahmad. That's like 5 Hiroshima bombs to be put on ballistic missiles. This is an original Iranian spreadsheet from the archives of Project Ahmad. Look at what it has here: yellow cake production, centrifuge enrichment process, warhead project, simulation project, and test. And indeed, when we analyzed what's in these archives, we found that Project Ahmad had all the 5 elements, the 5 key elements of a nuclear weapons program. I want to take them one by one. First element is designing nuclear weapons. This is an original Iranian illustration of a weapon. Again, you don't have to read Farsi to understand this. This is U-235, that's enriched uranium, right here at the core. That's the only place where you find in the core enriched uranium. And here's an Iranian simulation, original Iranian simulation, putting all these components together. That's the first component. Second component, developing nuclear cores. Here's a photo showing the casting process and a cast metal core from the archives. And here's the secret underground facility the Iranians were building to produce nuclear cores. We have hundreds of documents for each of these components. Third component, building nuclear implosion systems. This is an original Iranian photo of a measuring device for implosions. And here's a simulation of a nuclear implosion. Fourth element, preparing nuclear tests. Here's a map of 5 potential locations for a nuclear test in eastern Iran. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have many, many more such documents. And fifth, integrating nuclear weapons on missiles. Here's a design for a nuclear payload on a Shahab 3 missile from the archive. Here's the warhead. Here's the bomb. And I don't have to remind you, I think, that Iran is continually expanding the range of its ballistic missiles, its nuclear-capable missiles. They started with 1,000 kilometers. They're now up to 2,000, roughly. They can reach Riyadh, Tel Aviv, Moscow, but they're working on far, far greater ranges. They're planning much longer range missiles to carry nuclear weapons. So these files conclusively prove that Iran is brazenly lying when it says it never had a nuclear weapons program. The files prove that. But here's what happened next. Iran was faced with mounting pressure in 2003. You remember that. That was following the Gulf War. So it was forced to shelve Project Ahmad. But it didn't shelve its nuclear ambitions. So Iran devised a plan to do 2 things. First, to preserve the nuclear know-how from Project Ahmad, And second, to further develop its nuclear weapons-related capabilities. That plan came directly from Iran's top leadership. Here's another document from the archive. This is following the new directive of Iran's Minister of Defense, Mr. Shamkhani. Today is the director of the National Security Council. Following the new directive of Iran's Minister of Defense, the work would be split into two parts, covert and overt. A key part of the plan was to form new organizations to continue the work. This is how Dr. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, head of Project Ahmad, put it. Remember that name, Fakhrizadeh. So here's his directive. It's right here. And he says, the general aim is to announce the closure of Project Ahmad, but then he adds, special activities, you know what that is, special activities will be carried out under the title of scientific know-how developments. And in fact, this is exactly what Iran proceeded to do. It continued this work in a series of organizations over the years. And today, in 2010 or 2018, this work is carried out by Sapand. That's an organization inside Iran's defense ministry. And you will not be surprised to hear that Sapand is led by the same person who led Project Ahmad, Dr. Fakhrizadeh, and also, not coincidentally, many of Sapand's key personnel worked under Fakhrizadeh on Project Ahmad. So this atomic archive clearly shows that Iran planned at the highest levels to continue work related to nuclear weapons under different guises and using the same personnel. I want to give you another example of Iran's nuclear weapons-related activities that continued after Project Ahmad. You all remember the Fordow facility? Can you show that? Fordow uranium enrichment facility. This was a secret underground enrichment facility that the Iranians built under a mountain. You don't put thousands of centrifuges under a mountain to produce medical isotopes. You put them there for one reason: nuclear weapons, enrichment for nuclear weapons. But the files show that Fordow was designed from the get-go for nuclear weapons as part of Project Ahmad. Here's an original Iranian blueprint of Fordow. And what happened was that Iran continued to build Fordow years, secretly build it, years after Project Ahmad ended. Here's what it looks like. That's the entrance. It goes under a mountain. You also will not be surprised that Iran insisted on keeping Fordow. And amazingly, the nuclear deal enabled it to do it. It enabled it to do it, but this came with a hitch. Iran was required by the IAEA to come clean, by the nuclear deal, to come clean to the International Atomic Energy Agency about its nuclear program. This was an explicit condition for implementing the nuclear deal. Iran has to come clean. So in December 2015, the IAEA published its final assessment of what it called the military aspects of Iran's nuclear program. This is the report. This was Iran's chance to fully come clean to the IAEA. They could tell the truth. They could say, we had this program, the secret program. It's over. We shelved it. It doesn't exist. We destroyed the material. Here's what Iran actually told the IAEA. It said, Iran denied the existence of a coordinated program aimed at the development of a nuclear explosive device and specifically denied, get this, specifically denied the existence of the Ahmad plan. The material proves otherwise, that Iran authorized, initiated, and funded Project Ahmad, a coordinated program aimed at the development of a nuclear explosive device. Here's another document from the archive. This is a master plan of Project Ahmad. Iran said to the IAEA, no work has been conducted with multi-point initiation. This is multi-point initiation. You got to forgive me. This jargon, this scientific terminology is something that is necessary to understand the production of nuclear weapons. But here's what they say. No work has been conducted with MPI technology in hemispherical geometry. But again, the archive shows that this is a complete fabrication. Iran conducted extensive work with MPI technology in hemispherical geometry. Here's an example. Hundreds of more documents prove it. Iran said to the agency that it had not conducted metallurgical work specifically designed for a nuclear device. But the files again show that this is a lie. Iran conducted extensive metallurgical work specifically designed for a nuclear device. Here's an original Iranian photo, plenty more in the archive. So what I've shown tonight is just a fraction of the total material that we have. But even from this sample, you can draw four main conclusions. First, Iran lied about never having a nuclear weapons program. 100,000 secret files prove that they lied. Second, even after the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Why would a terrorist regime hide and meticulously catalog its secret nuclear files if not to use them at a later date? Third, Iran lied again in 2015 when it didn't come clean to the IAEA as required by the nuclear deal. And finally, the Iran deal, the nuclear deal, is based on lies. It's based on Iranian lies and Iranian deception. 100,000 files right here prove that they lied. So here's the bottom line. Iran continues to lie. Just last week, Zarif said this.
We never wanted to produce a bomb.
Again?
We never wanted to produce a bomb.
Yes, you did. Yes, you do. And the Atomic Archive proves it. The nuclear deal gives Iran a clear path to an atomic arsenal. It does so because it gives them the three components that are necessary to produce this arsenal. First, unlimited enrichment in a few years. And they plan to do that. They plan to have several 100,000 advanced centrifuges with which they can enrich mountains of uranium for that core that I showed you before, for many, many such cores. Second, it completely fails to address Iran's continuing development of ballistic missiles. And third, and this is new, it completely fails to address Iran's secret nuclear bomb program and its advanced work on weaponization. We just did. So this is a terrible deal. It should never have been concluded. And in a few days' time, President Trump will make his decision on what to do with the nuclear deal. I'm sure he'll do the right thing. The right thing for the United States, the right thing for Israel, and the right thing for the peace of the world. הערב אנחנו חשפנו הישג מודיעיני מהחשובים שידעה מדינת ישראל. חשפנו את הארכיון הסודי של הגרעין האיראני. החומר הזה נמצא בידינו מזה
Let's bring back in Fox News chief political anchor and anchor of special report, Bret Baier. Bret, you know, he laid out the evidence that they had those 100,000 files, basically outlining all of the details in the existence of the Ahmad program, which was a program apparently to build nuclear weapons, explaining that they lied about the existence of this program. They lied about ever trying to get a weapon. They lied to the International Atomic Energy Agency when, as part of the Iran nuclear deal, they were supposed to come clean about any plans in the past. And at that point, they specifically denied the existence of the Ahmad program. But these files, President Netanyahu says, also show, Prime Minister, pardon me, also show that they shifted this program from overt to covert and renamed it under a different name, keeping all the same people in place and kept all the files. Is that enough?
Melissa, well, let's just analyze this first as really astonishing to see a head of state lay out details like this that he says were captured and exfiltrated from Iran by Israelis, a half a ton of documents and digital files, that he goes on to detail how this program was in the works, is in the works, was hidden, and that the Iranians had lied about it. It seemed to me, coming to the end of this presentation, that his audience really was won. And that was for President Trump to see this. He did, as I mentioned, met with the new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, obviously talked about this and laying this out. And we are just days away from the president's decision about the Iran nuclear deal and what will happen. This is probably a mortal wound for the Iran deal in the eyes of the Trump administration and President Trump. And it was already on probably its last legs anyway. That was the decision we were thinking that he was going to make. But after this presentation, I think there will be a sense inside the White House that they are doing the right thing, and Europe is trying to hold on to some element of the deal to see if they can make something happen.
And we heard at the beginning, Benjamin Netanyahu said that, so like you said, that these files had been, you know, taken by Israeli assets out of the country, that those were not the originals, those were copies, that the originals are somewhere safe, but that all of those things had already been vetted and verified by the United States. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that obviously the intelligence community has been working with the Israelis. They always do. And this would be part of the gathering of intel outside of the IAEA process and trying to see if Iran was living up to not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law of the Iran nuclear deal. You know, the U.S. has other problems besides whether Iran was going to meet up with all the specifics of the Iran deal. They believe in this administration that other elements of Iran's activity should have been put in there to begin with. But they don't believe, talking to people inside the administration, that the Iran deal is strong enough as is to hold Iran's feet to the fire to prevent them from making a nuclear weapon in the long run.
Brett Baer, thank you so much. We will see you tonight at 6 p.m. No doubt, special report. We'll be focusing heavily on this latest development. Thank you so much for your time. Joining me now is Virginia Congressman Scott Taylor. He is a member of the House Homeland Security Committee, and I want to let people know that what we're looking at on our screen here is this is a joint press conference which was supposed to get started at 1:30 between the president of Nigeria and, of course, our president. We're going to bring that to you live when it happens because we imagine with all this other news breaking that there's going to be questions about that as well. But let's go back to the congressman now. What's your reaction to just what went by there?
It's kind of incredible to have a head of state come out there and lay it all out like that. But as you remember, you know, the Prime Minister was here prior to the deal being signed talking about how it was a bad deal. And I completely agree with him. We've traded short-term nuclear stability in the international stage for short-term regional instability, giving Iran money. They're obviously creating all kinds of havoc across the Middle East. And in the meantime, they're working on their missile delivery capabilities. And then eventually they'll be able to have, we basically guarantee them the ability to get a nuclear bomb. That's bad for the region, it's bad for us, it's bad for the world. So I think it was a bad deal, and you see them out here laying it all out on why that's the case.
Yeah, you wonder, though, I mean, I can imagine in the international community, who is going to accept these documents as authentic and who is going to question them? You know, I mean, the Prime Minister addressed that and said the Americans have already looked at them and have already authenticated them. I wonder, you know, who that will not be enough for. And within the International Atomic Energy Agency, you know, they'll have to look at them and authenticate them or not. I don't know.
I think they should let them. They should let them do it. Of course, let whatever country wants to look at them and authenticate them, let them do it. Obviously, the IAEA doesn't have the same capabilities as the Mossad does or our intelligence community. But I think they should let them that. They should let them do it. But I think that no serious person really believed that Iran wasn't trying to obtain a nuclear weapon.
There's
Right.
no, I mean, I don't think there's a question about it. You speak to any head of state over there in that region, they'll tell you the same thing. Of course they were trying to get a nuclear bomb.
So that in and of itself, I mean, you touched on it exactly. It's not groundbreaking that they were trying to get a nuclear weapon. That doesn't come as a huge surprise. Is it enough that they lied about that? The fact that they continued the files and maybe renamed the project, is that enough in the court of public opinion, or does there have to be proof that they continued with actual physical activity, and do they now have to find that?
Well, I think it's certainly enough in my mind to pull out of the deal, and I think in the court of public opinion it will be as well, because there's no question. Not only did they lie about it existing in the first place, they continue to lie about where this cache of intelligence, where they could easily restart the program, which is exactly what I just said to you a little bit earlier. You know, you have this delay of it. In the meantime, they're spreading their influence across the region. In the meantime, they're working on their missile delivery capabilities, and then as soon as that time runs out, boom! Now they restart the program. They have nuclear weapons, and they're way more advanced in terms of being able to deliver them around the world, including our homeland. So, yeah, it's definitely enough in my mind. I think the deal was weak. I don't think it addressed properly how to actually stop them from getting nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should have ever been signed. Now, I understand our European friends out there obviously want to have a lot of commercial activity with Iran.
Yeah.
You know, we probably do. Some of our companies do too. That's fine. And perhaps what has happened today, and I imagine what the president's going to speak about, will launch a restart in some sort of other negotiations to make sure that it's verified that they don't have nuclear weapons.
But you can imagine those who were in favor of the deal and those who were part of the Obama administration, they had said in defense of the deal that it stopped Iran on its path to get the weapon. They conceded that they were trying to get the weapon, even though the Iranians denied that. And they said that stopped them in this program. Wouldn't they just point to this as evidence of, yes, look, they were well on their way, and they stopped and they put it on hold? And yes, maybe they kept the plans to continue them going later, but they did stop at the time. Does that argument work?
No, I don't believe so, because yeah, they stopped at the time, but all they did in exchange for stopping at the time, they allowed Iran to be more hegemonic in the region, to become stronger, to become financially stronger, to have better delivery capabilities. So all they did was punt that problem down the road, and once it comes to fruition, when they actually were able to get nuclear weapons after the time expired, they would have been in a much, much stronger position, which would have been way more dangerous for the region and for the world. I think they were trying to just get a deal at all costs, and that, as we know, is a bad way to negotiate anything, to be negotiating from a position of weakness.
Yeah, and there are multiple things that need to get done on your way to a nuclear weapon. One of them is the ballistic missile program, which it was recommended in strong wording that they hold back on during this period, but it wasn't explicitly told that they couldn't, you know, go ahead with that program. And they've poured, in fact, a lot of the money that came from the reliefs of sanctions into that ballistic missile program. So in a lot of ways, they just moved from working on one portion of getting the weapon to working on a different part of it. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yes. And they also use that money to make sure that they're in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, that they were spreading their influence in Libya, around the Middle East, and all the while working on that program. And then as soon as that time expired, they could wait for the time. At that point, they would be so much stronger financially and militarily, and then we have real big problems down the line. So I just think it was a bad deal from the get-go. I remember when it was being negotiated, and I think it was a bad deal for our country and for the world. And you know, I don't support it. So I think that what the president is about to do is the right thing.
Yeah, and we're looking right now at the White House, and they're sort of focusing in on the doors here because we are waiting at any moment for the president to emerge with the president of Nigeria as well, and no doubt they will be talking about this issue as well.
I mean, the other thing is, when you look at North Korea, when we look at, I apologize.
No.
When we look at North Korea and we're about to negotiate some sort of peace deal in the Korean Peninsula, and of course to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, we want to show that when we have some kind of deal, the international community, that it's a strong one, that there are verified steps to ensure that they don't have a program. When you look at the Iran deal currently, it doesn't necessarily have that, and certainly doesn't for the future. So I think that, you know, this move that the president is probably about to make is going to have big implications and ramifications in the nuclear deal with North Korea.
Yeah. All right, Congressman Scott Taylor, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay, we're going to bring in our power panel right now. Jeannie Zaino is a political science professor at Iona College, and back from the Outnumbered couch is Katie Pavlich, editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Katie, I'll start with you. How compelling did you find the presentation by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, the Prime Minister said that these documents had already been backed up by the United States. The President has talked about his relationship with Netanyahu, and we have a strong, obviously, alliance with Israel. And I see the President coming now. So, Melissa, I'll take it back to you.
Okay, yeah, we're going to have our panel stand by as we watch these two leaders come to the microphone and talk about the relationship and potential between our two countries. Let's listen.
Today, I'm honored to host President Buhari of Nigeria at the White House, right here in the beautiful Rose Garden. President Buhari, I want to thank you very much for traveling to Washington for these important discussions. It's a true pleasure to welcome you to our nation's capital. Nigeria is the largest democracy in Africa. As I conveyed to President Buhari in our discussions, the United States deeply values and appreciates Nigeria's role as a strong democratic leader in the region. The United States is currently working to expand trade and commercial ties with African nations, including Nigeria, to create jobs and wealth in all of our countries. We hope to be the economic partner of choice for nations across the continent and all around the world. And you see what's happening with respect to trade and the United States. We are being respected again. I hope all African countries and countries throughout the world that we also will be supporting you and that they will likewise support us in our bid, along with Canada and Mexico, for the 2026 World Cup. We will be watching very closely, and any help that they could give us in that bid, we would appreciate. I'm pleased that Nigeria is one of our largest trading partners in the region, and we look forward to growing our trade relationship based on the principle of fairness and reciprocity. But we give Nigeria well over $1 billion in aid every year, and we have already started talking with the President about taking down the trade barriers, very substantial barriers to the United States trading with Nigeria. So we think that we are owed that. President Buhari has also taken several steps to fight corruption and improve the Nigerian business climate. And most of all, to me, it again is ripping down those trade barriers. These measures will make it easier for Nigeria and the United States companies to invest. And we will be investing substantially in Nigeria if they can create that level playing field that we have to very much ask for and maybe demand. I especially want to thank President Buhari for Nigeria's partnership and leadership in the fight against terrorism. He's been a real leader. Nigeria was one of the first African nations to join the coalition to defeat ISIS. And Nigerian forces are currently leading regional efforts against ISIS in West Africa and doing very well, as we have. Nigeria is also leading African nations in the fight against Boko Haram and another ruthless jihadist terrorist group. You've been reading about them. They kidnap the young girls and young women, many of whom never are seen again. It's tough stuff. This summer it was my honor to meet with two brave young women, Joy Bishara and Lydia Pogu, who were kidnapped by Boko Haram in April of 2014 at the secondary school in Nigeria. I was deeply moved by their inspiring stories of courage, resilience, and survival. They really were two amazing young women. I told Joy and Lydia, my administration is committed to combating both jihadist terrorism and the scourge of human trafficking and smuggling. In the world today, there is more human trafficking than there has ever been, if you can believe this. They use the internet better than almost anybody is able to use the internet. So think of it, in a modern world, in this world, there's more human trafficking and slavery. than at any time in the history of this world. It's hard to believe. To protect Americans from these menaces, I have called on Congress to close deadly immigration loopholes that are exploited by terrorists, traffickers, and criminals. Just look at our southern border and our weak and obsolete immigration laws. They are obsolete, and they are weak, and they are pathetic. And there's no country in the world that has laws like we do. They've got to change, and they've got to change now for the safety of our country. We're also helping our Nigerian partners by facilitating intelligence, cooperation, and providing training and military equipment to Nigerian forces. For example, we recently sold Nigeria 12 U.S. 829 Super Katano aircraft. It's great aircraft. In the first ever sale of American military equipment to Nigeria. These new aircraft will improve Nigeria's ability to target terrorists and protect civilians. Finally, we're deeply concerned by religious violence in Nigeria, including the burning of churches and the killing and persecution of Christians. It's a horrible story. We encourage Nigeria and the federal, state, and local leaders to do everything in their power to immediately secure the affected communities and to protect innocent civilians of all faiths, including Muslims and including Christians. Mr. President, thank you again for visiting the White House and being with us today. Nigeria is a valued partner and a good friend. I look forward to working closely with you to deepen our cooperation and forge an even closer partnership. The United States is committed to working alongside Nigeria as we seek a future of strength, prosperity, and peace for both of our countries. Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen of the media, it has been a pleasure and honor to visit Washington, D.C. at the kind invitation of President Donald Trump. Nigeria and the United States share a long history of close and cordial relations which encompass political, economic, military, social, and cultural cooperation. Our two countries maintain a strategic partnership for peace and security, conflict resolution, as well as the global fight against terrorism. We also share common features as secular federal states practicing a similar democratic model of governance and committed to the universal values of fundamental human rights and freedoms, free enterprise, social justice, and rule of law. President Trump and his team and myself and the Nigerian team discussed issues related to security, trade, governance, human rights, and humanitarian crisis. We congratulated the leaders of the North and South Korea on their historic summit, and we applaud them for the positive commitment they have made towards denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Trump deserves a great deal of credit for his statesmanly role in transforming so dramatically the course of events in that region. We also congratulated the United States government on the important role it played in the defeat of ISIS, although some of the remnants have found their way to the Sahel region. We recognize the strong United States support in our fight against terrorism and also appreciated very much the United States agreement to sell 12 Super Tucano A-29 warplanes and weapons to Nigeria to effectively fight terrorism. To contain the spirit of insurgency in Nigeria, the federal government has adopted a multi-sectorial approach involving related government agencies to address the socio-economic and political dimensions, while the armed forces of Nigeria assist the civil authority to provide security and maintain law and order. As part of efforts to address emerging cases of insurgency in the country, the Nigerian military adopted counter-terrorism insurgency approach codenamed Operation Safe Corridor to de-radicalize, rehabilitate, and reintegrate willingly surrendered Boko Haram members into the larger society. This program is currently embarking on a number of projects, including skill acquisition centers and integrated farms comprising poultry, fish pond, and greenhouse farming, among others. A number of international partners, including the International Organization for Migration, have contributed to the success of Operation Safe Corridor. We indicated that we would appreciate whatever support we could also get from the United States. We express gratitude to the United States' support in the reconstruction and rehabilitation efforts in the northeast of Nigeria, as well as humanitarian assistance to the internally displaced persons through agencies such as the United States Agency for International Development and other international partners. The United States of America has been, to date, the biggest contributor to the humanitarian response, and last year gave approximately $500 million United States dollars in cash and in kind contribution through the United Nations and other intergovernmental organizations. These have mainly supported protection activities, health, food assistance, and shelter. We are doing all we can to secure the release of the remaining abducted school girls from Dafchi and Chibok. In this context, we will continue to welcome United States collaboration in intelligence gathering, hostage negotiations, and information sharing. The government is taking necessary steps to promote the peaceful coexistence of herdsmen and farmers by focusing on boosting security and enforcing legislation that will guarantee borders and farmers access to land. I extend sincere congratulations to President Trump and his government on the impressive performance of the United States economy under his watch. Our aim is to diversify our own economy by focusing on agriculture and food security, power and infrastructure. We have cut the importation of rice by 90%, thereby saving a significant amount of money. We very much welcome increased United States investment in Nigerian economy, especially the non-oil sector. Economic relations between Nigeria and the United States are anchored on three major instruments, namely the Binational Commission, Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, and the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. The Binational Commission in particular, comprising bilateral, political, economic, developmental, and humanitarian partnership, is a basic economic framework for engagement between our two countries. Nigeria's trade volume with the United States stood at 6.07 billion United States dollars according to 2016 statistics, and comprised 4.76 billion United States dollars worth of Nigerian export to the United States and 1.894 billion United States dollars exports to Nigeria. We urge greater effort to increase these figures substantially. We thank the United States government very much for cooperation we have received in our effort to recover stolen funds. Our two governments have put the machinery in place for their respective attorney generals to collaborate in ensuring the return to Nigeria of over 500 million United States dollars of looted funds siphoned away in banks around the world. In this connection, we congratulate the United States government on launching a kleptocracy asset recovery initiative, which was spearheaded by the United States Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture and Money Laundering. We hoped that we could continue to count on United States support in this area. The government of Nigeria remains deeply committed to the principles of human rights as well as promotion and protection of people's freedom, even in the process of fighting terror. We commit to ensure that all documented cases of human rights abuses are investigated and those responsible for violation held responsible. I thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Steve Miller of the Washington Times, please. Washington Times. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. President. Had a two-parter on immigration. Last week, in the Supreme Court case over your travel ban, the lawyers for the opponents said that if you would simply apologize for some of your rhetoric during the campaign, the whole case would go away. And I was wondering if you would
I don't
be
think
willing.
it would, number one. And there's no reason to apologize. Our immigration laws in this country are a total disaster. They're laughed at all over the world. They're laughed at for their stupidity. And we have to have strong immigration laws. So I think if I apologize, it wouldn't make 10 cents worth of difference to them. There's nothing to apologize for. We have to have